Hey guys, this is Brown Chubby Bear with Political Bear Nation, and this is an update episode. On episode 1, I detailed why Donald Trump paused the tariffs and how much of the world has been working together and eliminating the United States from their trade talks. On episode 2, I talked about the issues with due process in Trump's America, specifically focusing on 2 innocent men that were deported with no respect to judicial review or due process. Those men were Andre Hernandez Romero and Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And that's where we'll start because it's not great news, guys. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a Maryland man who was one of the 238 men sent to Sicat, a maximum security prison for terrorists in El Salvador. And he is most likely not coming home anytime soon, if at all. Today, Trump met with the president of El Salvador, and he said, "How can I return him to the United States? I smuggle him into the United States? Of course I'm not going to do it. The question is preposterous. I do not have the power to return him to the United States. We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. To liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. That's the way it works." Last week, the Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, told the administration that Trump had to facilitate the transfer to bring Garcia back home. But the administration looks like they are defying that order. On Sunday night, Justice Department attorneys insisted the government is not required to work with officials in El Salvador to secure Garcia's return. A senior ICE official said in a sworn statement that Garcia no longer qualifies for withholding of removal because of the administration's claim that he's a member of the MS-13 gang. ICE said if Garcia was brought back to the United States, the government would work to quickly deport him. Another hearing in the case is set for Tuesday afternoon. Last week, Trump publicly stated, "If the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court." Doesn't sound like it, huh? Because that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Attorney General Bondi said, "That's up to El Salvador. If they want to return him, that's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled that if El Salvador wants to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane." And that's when the president of El Salvador weighed in, because he was asked by a reporter and said, "I don't have the power to return him to the United States. You want us to go back to releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? That's not going to happen." Ladies and gentlemen, the rule of law no longer exists in the United States. Innocent men can now be taken at the behest of the president, never to be seen again, and it gets so much worse. A video of Donald Trump talking to the president of El Salvador was taken where Trump asked for 5 more prisons for homegrowns, meaning for U.S. citizens. Here's the clip.
Demanded the people wanted to change the weapons and the water. He demanded they love you. They love what. No, I'm not your supporter. I want them to be homegrown criminals next. Yeah, I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, let's pay. All right, part of us. It's not big enough.
That's right. Trump is not only just defying the Constitution, he's not just defying the Supreme Court. He now wants to deport U.S. citizens to essentially a concentration camp. If you didn't watch the episode 2 breakdown, let me summarize what Trump did with the 238 men he sent to El Salvador. And by the way, he has continued sending more men since then. Also, if you didn't watch episode 2, I'll have a link to that video after this video is over. You can click on that video and watch it. I highly recommend you watch that if you haven't yet. It'll get you up to speed. But here's a quick summary. He reactivated the 1798 Aliens Enemy Act to get around due process, and he found ways to label these men as foreign terrorists. Now, when you label these men as a foreign terrorist, it requires no judicial review and no due process. Then he deported them out of the country and claims he no longer has jurisdiction in court. He said he has directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to look into the legal process for deporting U.S. citizens and said, "If it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem with that." He was asked to confirm if he was talking about natural-born U.S. citizens. And he said, and by the way, I'll stop doing my terrible Trump impression, but he said, If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, and yeah, that includes them, what do you think? There's a special category of person? They're as bad as anybody that comes in. This is one of the reasons why I thought it was foolish for Bill Maher to sit down with Trump, like everyone should just be friends. This is incredibly Hitler-esque, and Bill Maher was used as a propaganda tool. Trump conned him as he has conned so many. Now, what Trump is doing is clearly unconstitutional, but who's going to stop him? The Supreme Court has already declared that he is immune while he is president, and he is surrounded by sycophants who have no morals and do not care about the Constitution or the American people. Anyone that did care has already resigned or has been fired. David Lebrick, the top Treasury Department official, former acting Treasury Secretary, well, he retired after clashing with the administration over control of government payment systems. Daniel Sassoon, acting U.S. Attorney of SDNY, resigned in protest. Hagan Skine, Assistant U.S. Attorney, SDNY, resigned. John Keller, acting head of DOJ Public Integrity Section, he resigned. Kevin Driscoll, acting head DOJ Criminal Division, resigned. Bradley Werschmeyer, senior DOJ ethics official, resigned. Denise Chung, head of Criminal Division, U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., resigned after refusing to open a grand jury investigation she deemed inappropriate. More than 20 employees from the Department of Government Efficiency, now called DOGE, formerly the U.S. Digital Service, resigned in protest, citing ethical concerns and opposition to dismantling public services. At least 17 inspectors general at major federal agencies were dismissed by Trump in the first week of his second term, and over 240 individuals, including senior officials, board members, and agency leaders, were confirmed to have been dismissed, reassigned, or marked for layoffs in the early weeks of the administration. So there's no one left to stop him. The United States is now becoming a true fascist government. I never thought I'd see the day. Most of us took our freedom for granted. Well, now it's gone. Stay safe, everyone. We have 1,377 days to go. Let's hope we all make it. Now, to switch gears to the trade war updates. There's no easy way to transition to this, but even though we're witnessing the potential end of democracy, at least for this administration, we all need to eat and we all need to live. And until we can replace them in 2028, we have to live our lives. So the economy is still critically important. So first, the good news. The good news is the markets performed pretty well today. So your 401ks are continuing to make up a lot of the losses that Trump initially engineered. The Dow Jones was up over 300 points, but I'm not sure how long that will last once the markets figure out what's going on in Asia. So this is something that has been talked about in articles, but not really discussed on mass media, and I don't necessarily know why, but China has halted certain rare earth minerals that are critical to make cars, semiconductors, military jets, drones, robots, and even missiles. They also halted the export of rare earth magnets, which China produces 90% of the global supply. These minerals and magnets can only be exported from China with special new government licenses. And while China will distribute these to countries they have good relationships with, the United States is definitely not one of those countries anymore. The restrictions are part of China's response to Trump's tariff increases and may become permanent for certain companies, especially U.S. military contractors. Some countries like Japan have stockpiled up to a year of rare earth minerals, so they are in no immediate danger. But the United States does not have a significant stockpile of rare earth minerals. The National Defense Stockpile has a $13.5 billion gap between what is required and what is held in critical minerals. The U.S. lacks a strategic reserve and is heavily dependent on imports from China. But China has now cut us off. Trump thinks he can stockpile resources from deep-sea mining and boosting domestic mining and processing. The problem with this is that the administration does not seem to understand it's not just gathering the minerals themselves that are the problem, but refining these minerals are incredibly difficult. The biggest problem refining these minerals is that they have very similar chemical properties, making separation and purification of these minerals extremely challenging. Some require acid baking at very high temperatures and generate significant hazardous waste and radioactive byproducts. A mid-sized processing plant can cost $1 billion before producing any usable material. Any. That's part of the reason why China is the world's manufacturer. It's not just the labor savings. It's that they have the complete infrastructure, and Trump continues to piss off the second largest economy in the world. Even in places that do have minerals, like Denmark, for example, the refinement of these minerals is the problem. And China has been doing it for over 40 years. Experts say U.S. manufacturers will face critical supply shortages in a matter of just months. And that includes high-performance magnets for electric vehicles, wind turbines, and electronics. For some consumer goods, we should have enough for about 6 months, but the military is the most vulnerable, as rare earth minerals are essential for jet engines, radar systems, lasers, night vision goggles, armored vehicles. Trump's asinine trade war is literally making us less capable for the United States to defend itself. The national defense stockpile can cover about 40% of what is needed in a one-year conflict scenario, but no ability to replenish quickly. For some critical defense applications, such as the F-35 fighter jets and the missile guidance systems they use and other advanced electronics, production could be disrupted within just a few months. Expect shortages of American-manufactured EVs within 3 months. Other American consumer electronics will likely experience shortages within 6 months. Some national defense items with just a few months. Mountain Pass Mine in California and new projects in Wyoming are trying to get off the ground, but these are not producing rare earth minerals at any scale that would help us anytime soon. Mountain Pass is producing some rare earth oxides, but they are still sending out the final steps of processing overseas to China and also Japan. The Halleck Creek project in Wyoming won't be commercially ready until 2029. The project in Montana is still waiting for investment, despite the U.S. Export-Import Bank offering up to $553 million for the project. Long story short, we have a long way to go to be able to produce the rare earth minerals and magnets that we used to get from China. And if China refuses to supply us with them in about 6 months, we're going to be screwed. All because of a stupid trade war that never made any sense. While there is still a 145% tariff on goods imported from China, Trump provided an exemption on electronics, including smartphones, laptops, CPUs, memory chips, and some semiconductor manufacturing equipment. However, Commerce Secretary Lutnick also said that the exemption is temporary, and they will have a special type of tariff to make sure those products get reshored. Reshored? Reshored? Listen, guys, manufacturing in the United States is not coming back. Most of the manufacturing in America is now automated or becoming automated. We are not going to be sewing shoes or screwing iPhones together. The use of AI in manufacturing in the U.S. increased by 40% in 2024. And in 2025, about 1/3 of American manufacturers have heavily invested in AI already. Automation AI will do the bulk of U.S. manufacturing. While there will be some human manufacturing jobs as manufacturing companies use the hybrid model, which is using automation alongside humans, it will be very, very small. And even then, the roles for humans are for oversight, programming, maintenance, and innovation, rather than direct manual production. Half of those jobs will still require a college degree. The old world, where a blue-collar worker with no college education could get a well-paying manufacturing job, is over. It's done. It's never coming back. And I find it ridiculous that so many of Trump's supporters actually think we're going to be bringing millions of manufacturing jobs back. It's not happening. We need to move on. So we'll have to see how the market reacts when those exemptions are lifted. Lutnick expects the new tariffs on electronics to be announced in 1 or 2 months. Now, these electronics are still subject to the previous 20% tariff. So they are not completely exempt, but it's much better than the 145% tariff American consumers would have faced. Now, the issues surrounding Garcia, due process, and now the plan to deport U.S. citizens to El Salvador bother me way more than Trump's trade war. But none of it is good news. The best thing we can do is stick together and stay connected. subscribe to the channel. I'll keep providing you with the latest information so you can stay informed. Join the protests in your city this Saturday on the 19th. It's important that we show our dissent and hope that Congress and the courts do their jobs and stop Trump's plan from turning the United States into a fascist country. Until next time, this is Brown Chubby Bear with Political Bear Nation. Please subscribe to the Political Bear Nation YouTube channel and our audio podcast versions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
Political bears on an untamed ride, roaring through truths, the left and the right, setting the stage for a wild insight. Political Bear Nation ready to dive.